All right, right now what we're going to be doing is we're going to learn how to combine vectors using certain operations. So please just title it Combined Vector Operations. Right here, it's going to be very important that when you guys do this, you pay very close attention to what the different vectors are. So vector u, what are the components of vector u? -6 and -9. Remember, this is the x component and this is the y component. Vector w, its two components are equal to a 5 and a -4. So if it says 1/3 of vector u, just using what you know, what do you think you have to do with these components? You have to take what's called a third of them. So what is a third of vector u? Basically, what's -6 times a third? That's -2. And what is a third of -9? -3. So that's a third of vector u. Now, if you're not sure what I just did there, all I did was just take like a -6 and multiply it by a third. That's how I got the -2. All right. Over here we have vector w, and what is it saying to do with vector w? Take half of vector w. So what is half of vector w? So 5 over 2, or 2.5, and -2. Now, if you want to do 2.5, you can do 2.5. Then, after you do that, what does it want us to do? To add those together. So all I have to do is take a -2, and what am I going to add to it? Add 2.5, and that's going to give me a half. Over here, what do I have? I have -3. What am I going to add to that -3? I'm going to add a -2. And when I add and combine those together, I get -5. So right here, you can put 0.5 or you can put a half. And I'm going to put a -5. And that's going to be my answers for combining the vectors with other operations. Either adding, we're going to be adding or subtracting. So 1/2 and -5. Okay, let's do one more of combining with vector operations. I'm going to color code them, make it a little easier. Okay, so what are we starting with? We're starting with a 3 and a -1, and that's vector u. So that says -6 vector u. So what is -6 times vector u going to yield us? What do you think? -18 and +6. So that's -6 vector u. Vector w, we start with a -4 and a +4. Right here, what's it wanting us to do? Take a fourth of that. So I'm going to take, now you got to be careful. You can either take the -1/4 and find -1/4 vector w, but if you take the positive, then eventually you're going to have to subtract. So I'm going to find -1/4 vector w and just then add everything together. So what's negative times a negative is a positive, so that's a 1. A negative times a positive keeps it negative, so that's -1. So now I'm just going to add those together. So my final answer, when I add them together, is going to be -17, and 6 minus 1 is 5. So -17 and 5. So be careful here. If you decide you want to go ahead and multiply the negative in, that's totally okay. Okay? But if you didn't, then you'd still have to do the subtraction if you forgot to do that. So -17 and a 5. I'll go over here and type that in. negative 17, 5. Okay, so that's what combining with vector operations. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be doing unit vectors. So now we're going to be getting into this thing called unit vectors. So all I'm going to do is remember the negative 8 and the negative 6. So I'm going to go to some graph paper here. All right, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to make an x-axis and a y-axis. And if you're wondering why I drew it that way, this is going to be our quadrant 1. This is going to be our quadrant 2. This is quadrant 3. And this over here is quadrant 4. And we have vector v. And I believe I said we're at a negative 8 and a negative 6. So what I want you to do is I want you guys to go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and go down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right? Because I'd like you in your drawing here to draw it from the origin right there to right there. So there is a vector right here that went negative 8 in the x component and negative 6 in the y component. All right? And if we want to know this magnitude of vector v, then all we have to do is we have to use our components. Hopefully when we do this, it'll make a heck of a lot more sense. There's our y component. There's our x component. Just label it. There's the negative 8. There's the negative 6, just using the basic Pythagorean theorem. What are we going to do? We're going to take that and square it, that and square it, and yes, this becomes 64 and 36. So what is our magnitude going to be? It's going to be what? All the way there, it's going to be a 10. Okay? How many units was the magnitude? 10 what? 10 total units. But we don't want it to equal 10 units because we want it to be what's called a unit vector. A unit vector, we want it to equal 1 unit. So here's what all you guys have to do. Right here, I'm going to change colors. Take your x component and divide it by the magnitude, comma, take your y component, divide it by the magnitude, and that gives you your component you would need for the unit vector. So check this out. What was our x component for this? Negative 8. What was our magnitude for this particular vector? 10. What was the y component? Negative 6. What was our magnitude? 10. What does this reduce to? Negative 4/5 and negative 3/5. What I want you guys to see, if I were to use these components right here, watch what happens. You guys ready? Go to your calculators, check this out. If I take parentheses, negative 4/5, and I square it, and I add negative 3/5, and I square it, look what it equals. And what's the square root of 1? 1. That lets me know that those are my unit components for the unit vector. So if you're wondering what we just did here, all I did was do what? Found the magnitude of our vector and then took the x component, divided it by the magnitude, took the y component, divided it by the magnitude. And our answer is negative 4/5 and negative 3/5. Negative 4/5 and negative 3/5. Okay? Here we go. Let's do one now where we actually have to find it's not multiple choice. You guys see the 8 and the 9? I'll show you how to find the unit vector in the direction of this. So right now, what's our x component? 8. So what am I going to do? I'm going to square the 8. I'm going to square the 9. Take the square root. So we're going to take 64 plus 81. When you take 64 and 81 and add them together, you get a really ugly number, 145. So what would be our magnitude? The square root of what? 145. Okay? You don't have to simplify. Even if you get radicals that you have to simplify, don't worry about it. Okay? I just want you to understand. Here, all I'm going to do is put in 8 over the square root of 145. I'm going to put 9 over the square root of 145. I know what you're thinking. Aren't you supposed to rationalize the denominator? You don't have to on this. If we had to simplify it, we would have to. Okay? I'm just going to put this over that and this over that and call it a day. Just remember, x component over the magnitude, y component over the magnitude, and this would give us what's called a unit vector if we were to work it out. So here we go. Where is it? I got to type it in. I'm going to pause real quick. All right, so right here, type in an 8. Right here, got to use the radical and type in a 145. Type in a 9 over the square root of 145. It didn't say simplify, so I should be able to do it without having to simplify it and rationalize the denominator. Okay? Let's do one more. Hopefully this will be enough. It'll make sense. The direction matters. So right here, where are we starting? Negative 8 and a 5. So I'm going to take the square root of negative 8 squared plus 5 squared. So I got 64 plus 25, which gets me the square root of 89. So all I'm going to do is my answer is going to be negative 8 over the square root of 89, comma, 5 over the square root of 89. I hope you see the answer. That's it. Once more, what are we going to do with the 2? We're going to square it. What are we going to do with the negative 8? We're going to square it. Take the square root. That's 4. That's 64. That's 68, but you don't have to simplify that. When I mean you don't have to simplify it, you don't have to break it down to a 4 and a 17 and a 2 and a 2 and make it 2 radical 17. All right, all we're going to do here is we're going to put a 2 over the square root of 68 and negative 8 over the square root of 68. That's all we're going to do for that answer. Sorry if you can't read my handwriting. That's 2 over the square root of 68 and negative 8 over the square root of 68. Okay? So 2 over the square root of 68. And here, I got to put a negative, not an equal sign, negative 8 over the square root of 68. Okay? And that's it. So that's basically all we're going to be doing today. Have a good day.